I was in. Then I joined the Workers' World Party. And when I was in the Workers' World Party, every time I mentioned overpopulation, they would say to me, well, we don't believe in that. And I'd say, why? And they'd say, because it's racist. And I said, it's racist. And they would say, yeah, overpopulation means you want to kill non-white people because you never want to kill the people that are the same race as you, and it's racist. And I was just like, oh, okay. And I just kept believing in overpopulation, assuming it was good science, because no one, and that was the first time I ever heard any Marxist explain to me that overpopulation was not true. And it was just, it's racist. Well, actually, Karl Marx wrote an entire book explaining why overpopulation isn't real. And it's a really good book. And it's called Theories of Surplus Value. And you can read this book. And in this book, Karl Marx explains why overpopulation is bullshit, right? And it's really good, actually. And that's actually a really, really big part of Karl Marx's teaching, is that human labor creates all wealth, and that it is human labor that creates wealth, and that creates food, and that no, the population doesn't outstrip the food supply, and no, the economic crisis that led to the French Revolution was not caused by overpopulation. It was caused by the irrational restriction of feudalism. And Marx, you read Theories of Surplus Value, go read this. It's all about why there's no such thing as overpopulation and why overpopulation is bullshit. That is an essential part of Marxism. Marxists in America don't know that because they are too busy sucking the dick of the Malthusian woke left that does believe in it. Right? And it took me, I was in the Workers' World Party. Nobody told me about this book. Nobody taught me anything. All they ever said was overpopulation's racist. Sam Marcy, the founder of the Workers' World Party, he knew this, and he had studied this because he was born in Russia, and he'd been in the Communist Party, USA, during the William Z. Foster days, and he knew this, okay? But the boomers he recruited, they didn't know this, and they don't care about economics. They just want to be king of the protest cage. They don't care, right? Now, there was a very important Marxist in New York City during the 1960s named Lynn Marcus. And Lynn Marcus was a Marxist who knew all of this stuff and was really, really, really obsessed with it. He was really, really opposed to Malthusianism, probably because of the fact that he was a shoe salesman and he worked in the shoe sales and shoe advertising industry, which was very middle class, and he was friends with a lot of people that were in the John Birch Society, which was the McCarthyist group, right? An anti-communist group. And the John Birch Society believed that Malthusianism and Marxism were the same thing, right? The John Birch Society was also opposed to Malthusianism. It was a small business owners. Lyndon LaRouche, he was a shoe salesman, and his father had been a shoe salesman, and his father was a strong anti-communist Quaker. And Lyndon LaRouche, Lynn Marcus, he was somebody who was very smart and had studied Marxism, but through his job, he was hanging out with a lot of John Birch Society people, clearly. And the John Birch Society people, they hated the liberal establishment because it was Malthusian and because it promoted degrowth. They hated the Rockefellers and all of that. And they thought Malthusianism was Marxism. And Lyndon LaRouche knew that it wasn't. And so Lyndon LaRouche studied Marxism and wrote extensively about how Marx and Malthus didn't agree with each other. So Lyndon LaRouche, he was in the Socialist Workers' Party for a while, and then after a while, he started giving his own classes in New York City, and he had a group called the National Caucus of Labor Committees. And the National Caucus of Labor Committees, their defining belief was they were against any form of Malthusianism, right? And the New Left and the environmental movement embraced Malthusianism, and the Communist Party had the orientation that because the New Left was nicer to the Soviet Union than the conservatives were, to tail after the New Left. And all of them did. The Workers' World Party, all of them just tailed after the New Left. They followed the movement. Well, LaRouche was so embedded in this stuff he was not going to join any movement that was Malthusian. So he became the enemy of the New Left, and he got into fistfights with the Communist Party, and eventually he was a Reagan supporter. And Laroucheism is a whole new, and they started following Friedrich List and all of that. Laroucheism is an interesting thing, but the foundation of Lynn Marcus and Lenin Larouche's teachings is this, that Marx was against Malthusianism. And it's funny, I see, it's amazing how many beliefs Workers' World and LaRouche have in common, but they hate each other so much. The difference is that Workers' World supported the New Left and wanted to recruit out of the New Left and wanted to push the New Left to be pro-Soviet. They wanted to be the pro-Soviet, pro-Chinese, pro-communist wing of the New Left. Lynn Marcus, Lyndon LaRouche, decided that the New Left was the main danger. In the short term, Workers' World was right, and in the long term, Lynn Marcus was right. Right? Lynn Marcus was way ahead of his time, because at the time, Reagan and all of them were way more anti-Soviet, and the arms race was the immediate threat to the Soviet Union. In the long term, though, we now see the woke left is the main danger, and that wokeism is the main ideology of imperialism, and is completely cut ties. I mean, if you defend, Stalin, they call you a Nazi. They say you're the same as Hitler, right? So it took a long time for what Lynn Marcus saw to really come into reality. He was 20, 30 years ahead of his time. Whereas the Workers' World Party, in the short term, they were right, but they knew better. Like, for example, and what you're saying is very true, Sam Marcy was not against nuclear power. And the Workers' World Party has bent over backwards to cover this up, right? They do not want people to know this. But I know this for a fact because when I first moved to New York, the Fukushima nuclear accident happened. Right? That happened when I was first in New York City. And we had forums to discuss it. And people who knew Sam Marcy got up at the forums and said, Sam Marcy said we must never oppose nuclear power. There's even a pamphlet somewhere. I cannot find it. I don't remember what it was called, where the Workers' World Party says they're not opposed. It was printed in the 80s, where it says we are not opposed to nuclear power. We just don't trust capitalist corporations to run it. We're not opposed to GMOs. We just don't trust Monsanto. And they said, you never take an anti-science position, right? You never take a position of opposing technological progress. There's nothing inherently wrong with nuclear power. That's what they said. They said that. They said that. Deirdre Griswold, who is the daughter of Vince Copeland, who was the leader of Workers' World Party, she was a vegetarian. She was very opposed to nuclear power, and she was a crazy environmentalist, and she got on an environmental kick. And she has done her best to just cover that up. But it is a fact. Sam Marcy always said, and it's funny because the Workers' World Party people joined the anti-nuclear protests. They marched against nuclear power. They marched against nuclear power plants and stuff in the 80s, but they always made the point, we oppose it under capitalism. And we don't trust capitalist corporations, and we oppose the American nuclear power industry because it's tied in with making nuclear weapons. But we're not opposed to nuclear power, right? And that's what Lynn Marcus was a big defender of nuclear power. They both read the same Marx. Lynn Marcus and Sam Marcy both read this, and they knew, and they both opposed overpopulation, right? Sam Marcy would always say, we must never believe in overpopulation. And I'm sure Sam Marcy could have explained to me this. However, his followers, they knew it was a rule. You should never believe in overpopulation. But all they knew how to say about it was, oh, it's racist. It's racist. It's racist. It's interesting. It's very, very interesting. Again, go and read Out of the Movement to the Masses. I have a chapter about Sam Marcy, and I have a chapter called Divisions in the Ruling Class that has a section in it called The Case of Lynn Marcus. This is all very, very interesting to me, right? Sam Marcy and Lynn Marcus were both right, even though they hated each other's guts, even though they got into fistfights with each other. I mean, I don't think they literally went out to fight each other. I think they had their boomers do it. They were both, greatest generation, World War II generation guys, but they both had boomers who followed them get into fistfights with each other. But in a way, they were both right. And they both said they're not against nuclear power. right? They both were for nuclear power and knew that to be a Marxist, you had to believe in nuclear power. You couldn't be against it. They both did not believe in overpopulation, and they both knew that overpopulation was nope, you can't believe that. And they both, I mean, they had basically the same foundation, economically speaking. I will say, and this is why I'm so thankful. Again, God works in mysterious ways. I never would have come across this knowledge, but when the financial crisis happened in 2008, Fred Goldstein, who was not a nice person to me in a lot of ways, but Fred Goldstein, he wrote a book. He wrote a book which I have here. Yeah, I'm just trying to. He wrote this book, and he went on a speaking tour to promote this book. And I sat in many classes with Fred Goldstein. And in those classes, he explained the problem of overproduction, the value crisis, the tendency of the falling rate of profit. And he also explained that the higher stage of communism is based on vast abundance. I did not understand that, right? But he explained that you cannot build an egalitarian society in poverty. And he explained that the higher stage of communism, a stateless, classless world, is only possible with vast abundance, and that the whole point of socialism is to unleash the productive forces so we can have endless growth and have that ultimate stage. He explained all of that. Now that's Marxist economics, and Fred learned that from Sam Marcy. And then later I read this book, The Future is Up to Us by Nelson Peary. Well, it's around here somewhere. I have the Nelson Peary book, The Future is Up to Us, which makes the same point. And I read, the old economic texts, R. Palm Dutt, Fascism and Social Revolution, William Z. Foster. But this stuff is not out there anymore. It's funny. I started out this stream talking about how these ideas are not out there anymore, right? The idea that the problem with capitalism is that it holds back economic growth. Nobody talks about that anymore. The understanding that the higher stage of communism requires vast abundance, that's the basis of Deng Xiaoping theory. That is central to what the Chinese Communist Party believes, but communists in America don't think that anymore. It's interesting. There's a lot here, but yes, it's all very, very interesting. But I guess the point, Gavin, is that Malthusianism was hammered into my head as a child. And I don't believe in it. And I honestly believe that a lot of the difficulties I've had in life and a lot of my own spiritual journey has been rooted in Malthusian assumptions. Malthusianism is anti-human. It views human beings as the problem, right? That there's too many people and they consume too many resources, right? It basically, the term is non-productive consumers, but it's actually useless eaters, right? And that it believes that this earth cannot sustain people and that the population grows faster than the food supply. And it's wrong. Malthusian economics is wrong, right? And it takes with it a very, very negative feeling toward humanity. And if you have a Malthusian worldview, you can't believe in growth. And if you can't believe in growth, you can't love yourself and you can't be a productive human being, right? Right? You learned it from public television. Sure. Well, and I mean, until I was like 11 years old, all I was allowed to watch was public television. My parents didn't want me to see commercials because they thought that, and they were very strict. And so I watched nothing but public television. And, Malthusianism was hammered into my head as a kid. And it's wrong. And it's antisocial. You can't be a happy person and have healthy relationships. And you cannot live a productive life if you don't believe in growth and if you believe human beings are inherently bad, right? It is a misanthropic worldview, right? You can't be a misanthrope and be happy because human beings are social creatures and they need other people, right? So knowing that Darwin was a Malthusian, I will not go to war to defend Darwin. I won't do it.